What's the funniest thing you/someone you've seen has done accidentally? Story 1. There's one individual where I work who really enjoys the fart game. It all started one day when he walked into my cube while I was working at my computer and said, "What are you working on?" And then proceeded to rip one and just walk away laughing. Well, you have to fight fire with fire, so of course I had to drop one on him when he was least expecting it. The game has now continued for years, with salvos being fired in both directions, but now it has evolved into a very strategic battle, because what are you working on? Won't get you within range anymore, it will just get you a boot in the ass as you try to position correctly. It now takes a good diversion like dropping something, tripping, or carrying something interesting in order to attack successfully. Well, one day my opponent sees an opportunity when I'm standing in my cube talking on my cell phone with my back turned to him. He approaches silently and backs his ass into the entrance to my cube and lets a real ear splitter fly. I turn around and my coworker is mortified to see that I am not me, I'm a client who just happens to look like me with my back turned and who is now looking at him with a half puzzled, half angry, WTF look on his face as he continues listening to his phone call. My coworker doesn't have a clue what to say or do, so he turns to a nearby cart of work materials and begins busily shuffling things around like nothing happened. He does that for about 10 seconds and then, all red-faced, comes to find me to warn me what I'm now facing when I return to my cube. I give the air a chance to clear for about 3 minutes and then head back to my cube to try to clean up the mess, so to speak. I sit down at my desk and pick right up talking about what the client and I were discussing before I left. He never says a word about the fart, but I begin to feel a grin coming on and soon I have an ear-to-ear smile that I can't suppress and I have to excuse myself again to go laugh my ass off in a back room. The event is never mentioned by the client and I earn his business. This is now legendary at our place of work. Story 2. One of my kids dropped his hat when out feeding the ducks at the park. My wife picked up the hat, threw it into the pond with the ducks and handed him the bread she had in her other hand. Story 3. On a very quiet day in the Students' Union building, I tripped on a step. I looked around me in embarrassment, but began to smile as I realized there was no one on that floor to see what had happened. At that moment a guy at least 40 feet away on the next floor up leaned over the rail and shouted, "You thought no one saw that, didn't you?" Story 4. Not sure if this belongs to the thread, but I'll give it a shot. Back in the days, I used to work as a cashier at the supermarket. On this particular day we were extremely busy, and every register had a bagger assigned to it. The bagger assigned to me was this mentally handicapped kid whose entire day was comprised of a narrow preset of actions, which he's obeyed religiously. Sometime these got him into trouble, this was one of those days. Sometime in the afternoon, this very obese woman going through the line with a cart of groceries, topped off with large amount of candy. She must have had at least 10 pounds of candy. After staring at the amount of candy for at least a minute without blinking, the bagger finally exclaims, "Ma'am, would you like your candy in the bag, or you're just going to eat it on your way home?" The lady is absolutely furious, the bagger has a confused half-smile on his face and I am involved in an exercise of constraint which luckily kept me from bursting into laughter. Story 5. My husband and I were out to dinner for Mexican food with his mom and stepdad. My mom-in-law is not one to drink, but we each ordered a Corona, so she ordered one too. We were all about one halfway done with our beer, just chatting and eating chips and salsa. The salt and pepper shakers on our table were little Coronita bottles. She picked up her beer and procked to pour it all over our basket of chips. She thought it was the salt shaker. Funniest thing I have ever seen. Story 6. I was drinking with my brother who was on crutches as he had broken his ankle. We had been outside having a cigarette and walked back in through a small utility room, which had a plastic lino floor. As he had been outside in the wet, the rubber stoppers on the crutches immediately lost traction on the lino floor. He started to fall and the closet thing to him, which was an ironing board which he grabbed to break his fall. The ironing board couldn't support his weight, so the front legs buckled and broke. Now immediately opposite the ironing board was a dishwasher. As the ironing board broke, the front end pulled open the drawer of the dishwasher and rested, pulling out the top shelf which was full of wine glasses. The iron slid down the slope of the ironing board and procked to smash all the wine glasses. I watched the whole charade unfold, and he ended up on the ground surrounded by mayhem, sobbing "Help me up." Incidentally, this was a friend's house, priceless. Story 7. Me and 2 friends were driving down to a wedding a couple of years ago during a snowstorm. The driver had to piss, so he pulled over at a rest stop. The entire parking lot was covered in about 8 to 10 inches of snow. It looked like a completely flat parking lot, and my buddy was driving about 15 miles per hour through it when the passenger side of the vehicle hit a hidden curb/island in the midpool of the parking lot. It was covered by the snow and he never saw it. This isn't the funny part though. He has a Dodge Ram 2500 and the truck handled it fine. We stop, he goes into the bathroom, my other friend and I stand under an enclosure and light up a smoke. About a minute later a minivan comes flying into the rest area. The guy must have been going 40 miles per hour and was headed for the curb that we half hit. He was perfectly lined up. He hit it at speed and launched his minivan about 2 to 3 foot in the air, with the front end landing first, like it was straight out of a movie. We just watched in stunned silence. He parked, got out and acted like nothing happened, while taking a quick look at his front bumper to check for damage. That's when we lost it and couldn't stop laughing for a good 5 minutes. Story 8. I used to deliver pizzas. One customer was behind a store and down a very steep driveway to his house. I go down there, deliver the pizza, and I'm making my way out. For some reason, I have difficulty seeing where this guy's driveway is. So I point my car where I think it is, and floor it to make it up the incline. My car screams up the grass slope in front of his house and lands in the parking lot of the store. Funny, I don't think he ordered a pizza from us again. Story 9. I was leaving the Magnolia Cafe in Austin one cold early morning when a hipster pushed past me and attempted to gracefully leap over the metal railing, but instead tripped up on it and landed hard on his chest on a parking curb. It was scary at first, but once he got up and tried to scramble away like nothing happened, it was pretty hilarious. Story 10. Back when I was an undergrad, and I didn't have much going on Fridays, I would go to math club on campus because most of the talks were interesting and there was free food. Anyways, I'm sitting there and I notice my professor who was lecturing is wearing pants with a gaping hole in the crotch. I ask him about it, and without skipping a beat, he replies, "You can't fit 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack." I just about lost it right there. It was amazing. If you made it this far, please consider pressing the subscribe and like button. Now continue to the video. Story 11. In summer school baseball in middle school, I was playing first base when a batter hit a high pop fly my way. I could tell it was going foul, but I wanted to grab it for an out. So I sprint full speed toward where it is going, eyes up on the ball until wham! I am sudden on the ground. Not looking where I was going, I had slammed full speed into the chain link fence, which had absorbed all my energy and rocketed me backward. Play stopped for a good 10 minutes so everyone, including myself, could stop laughing. Story 12. Once, when I was a kid, I was playing baseball with my dad, best friend, and my sister. My dad was pitching, Buddy and I were batting, and my sister was the catcher. So anyways, I'm showing off that I can bat both ways and it's neat and whatever, so my buddy steps up and figures he can do it. So he lines up ready to swing, Dad starts into the pitch, and it was just the time he was releasing the ball we all realized that he hadn't actually changed his swing, just the side of the plate he was standing on. Whack! He cracked my sister full tilt across the forehead with an aluminum bat. LOL. She was okay, because he was only 5 or 6, so didn't have much power, but my buck was at a good laugh. Story 13. I had my apartment all to myself this past Friday as all my roommates were out visiting family. I was drinking a deliciously awful Rainier tall boy in our living room when I saw an extremely drunk guy barely stumble down the stairs outside my apartment. It was a snowy Seattle day. He nearly face planted 4 times just getting down the 16 steps to the ground level. I cracked open my window as he was fruitlessly trying to steady himself, and asked him if he was alright. He spent the next 5 minutes unable to figure out where the voice was coming from, spinning around asking who was out there. I earnestly wasn't trying to buck with the guy, but he thought he was hearing voices, and it didn't help that I couldn't stop laughing. He eventually made it inside the adjacent building and, From what I could tell, head butted the wall inside hard enough to induce concussion. Story 14. Too late to be noticed, but here we go, human dissection in anatomy class, and my lab partner was dissecting out the nerves of the armpit. Thing is, cadavers are preserved in formalin, which besides tainting every meal for the rest of the day, also make tissue more rubbery, as my partner learned when a lump of fat flicked up into his open mouth. He swallowed reflexively. Story 15. I saw Frank Skinner live, and he tells a great story about a time he saw someone in a suit who was rushing somewhere. He tripped up, and as he stumbled forwards, he broke into a jog to stop himself from falling. After a couple more strides of jogging, he slowed down to a walk again and looked at his watch, pretending that he had deliberately jogged, and not stumbled, to make sure he wasn't late for wherever it was that he was going. I'm sure someone out there can find it on YouTube. Story 16. My son flooded the toilet with a hard metallic toy. Toilet was full of piss and shit before we realized the blockage. I couldn't snake the toy out. I went into the basement to detach the pipe to see if I can snake the toy from the opposite direction. I asked my wife to hold a bucket just underneath where I was working the snake. I told her to make sure she doesn't move or all of the crap above will go all over the floor. As I dislodged the toy, the pipe shifted and my wife got doused with all of the piss and shit that was flooded in the toilet above. What seemed like an eternity, she was screaming at the top of her lungs while she gets doused and all the while held the bucket in the same spot without moving. One of the funniest moments in my life. Story 17. During a tennis summer camp once, we were picking up the balls near the end of the day. I was in 6th grade at the time. All the balls were in the basket and we were about to bust out the Gatorade cooler. The instructor, let's call him Kurt, sees one more ball at the far end of the courts 3 courts widths away. Seeing that I was the most hyper of the kids, Kurt asked me to run and get it, which I gladly did. For some reason I still held onto my racket, and when I got to the ball and looked back, I decided to just hit it to him, he catches well anyway. So I hit a really high arc ball toward him. It didn't occur to me mid-arc that I should probably alert him that a ball is headed his way. He was facing away at the time doing whatever. So on top of my lungs I yell Kurt. And he turns around. Right in the crotch. He was on the ground for a minute laughing and in pain. By the time I ran back I wasn't sure to laugh or feel bad, so I said sorry, and then stood there nervously chortling. Story 18. I was walking with a few friends through the food and bar strip next to our university when 3 sorority girls jogged past. The one in front was trying to text, dropped her phone due on accident, and we all watched it bounce on the pavement and then fall down a street gutter. The shock on her face was fantastic. Story 19. I went to pick up my 2 younger brothers up from a sandlot baseball game they had going down at the park. My youngest brother was about 14 at the time. He was bored waiting for his turn to bat, and got the wise idea to bust a 3-liter plastic Coke bottle by hitting it with a bat. I was leaning on my car waiting and watching and didn't really realize what he was about to do. He puts the cap on it, lays it on the ground, aims it towards the other guys waiting to bat and picks up a bat. Then legs spread standing beside, he swings at the Coke bottle on the ground as hard as he could. What I heard next was thump, doink as the bat hit the sealed plastic bottle, and rebounded at full speed and nails him right on the forehead. That was the doink. He drops like he was poleaxed. We run up to him and he's laying on the ground groaning, oh, he gradually comes to, and we help him up. He had the hugest goose egg you have ever seen, dead center on the middle of his forehead. I mean, take a baseball, cut it in half and glue it on your head. That is what he had. We laughed our asses off at him. Both his eyes were black the next day, and he had that goose egg for days. Every time we would see him we would start laughing again. TLDR, little brother hits 3-liter plastic bottle with a baseball bat and gets a goose egg size of a baseball on forehead. Story 20. Was at a party and my friend has just been caught in somebody's room upstairs. We retreated to the basement and the dude whose room it was looking to kick some ass. For whatever reason we start rallying people to help us, and this drunk as shit guy is getting real fired up about the situation as I'm describing the comical turn of events that led us to this point. The dude cheers and slams his beer bottle against the palm of his hand. The bottle explodes in a mist of broken glass and beer spray. Guy is bleeding all over the place, and it appears that medical attention should really be now his top priority. We decide to just get the buck out of there. 2. Some other party. I'm chilling on this deck smoking. The deck is quite high, at least a story and a half above the ground below. Some guy comes out and asks, "Dude, where can I take a piss?" I replied, "Just take a piss off the deck." Guy completely misinterprets this and apparently fails to realize this large patio deck we're on isn't at ground level. He goes to jump and his foot catches on the railing. He does a full somersault and lands in the not too deep snow below on his back, gets up like nothing happens and starts taking a piss.